I never thought I would notice him in the way I did. At first, he was just a presence in the corner of the cafe where I spent my afternoons writing, a presence that didn't demand attention but somehow stole it anyway. I would see him there on certain days, quietly reading, sipping his cappuccino, seemingly unaware of anyone around him. He was tall, not overly so, just enough to stand out among the other patrons, and there was a quiet elegance to the way he moved. His hair was always slightly messy, like he had run his hands through it absent-mindedly, and there was a faint trace of cedar that lingered after he left. I started noticing the small things. The tilt of his head when he listened to someone, leaning in ever so slightly as if every word mattered. The way his fingers traced patterns across the table, invisible to anyone else but hypnotic to me. It was like watching a musician play a melody only I could hear. And the first time I noticed it, I felt a strange flutter in my chest, a warmth I couldn't name. Days became weeks, and the rhythm of our silent coexistence began to feel comforting. I observed the patterns he didn't even know existed, the cappuccino he always ordered on Tuesdays, the way he smiled at the barista with a mixture of warmth and hesitation, the small wrinkle of his brow when he concentrated. Each of these small discoveries felt like pieces of a puzzle, revealing him slowly, carefully, without him ever knowing. And somewhere along the way, admiration transformed into something deeper. I was terrified of my own feelings. How could someone so composed, so serene, so untouchable, ever notice me? How could someone like him notice someone like me at all? And yet, my thoughts kept drifting toward him. I traced the line of his jaw in memory, the subtle cadence of his voice, the brief moments our hands almost touched when I reached for my notebook. It was in the quiet details that I realized I was falling. The way he laughed quietly at a joke no one else seemed to hear. The way he would pause mid-sentence to watch a bird outside, as though the smallest miracles of the world could not escape him. I found myself longing to share those moments, even in silence, even if it was just sitting across the table and feeling the space we occupied together. One rainy afternoon, I bumped into him outside the cafe. He was trying to shield himself from the drizzle with a crooked umbrella, his hair damp at the edges, and I felt a strange surge of excitement and nervousness. I wanted to say something witty, clever, memorable, but all I managed was a small, awkward hello. And he smiled, just slightly, and nodded. That tiny gesture, almost nothing to him, left a warmth in my chest that lasted the entire day. We began to exchange small words, shy greetings that gradually became short conversations. I discovered he liked books with delicate prose, the kind that lingered in your mind after you had finished reading. I learned that he often took long walks through the city late in the evening, listening to the sounds of the streets and the subtle music of life. I learned slowly that he noticed things, the kind of details most people missed, and that those details made the world feel alive in a way I had never felt before. And then one evening, while we were both reaching for the same chair at a small reading event, our hands touched. Not by accident, not by intention, but in that fleeting, delicate moment, something shifted. My heart betrayed me with a quick, sharp flutter. I looked at him, and for a heartbeat, everything narrowed down to just us. Something unspoken passed between us, acknowledgement, recognition, possibility. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I let the moment exist in its fragile perfection. Our interactions became a quiet dance. A smile shared across the room. A moment of laughter over a book or a shared memory. A gesture as small as offering a chair or passing a pen. Each time, I found myself more entangled in my feelings, though I said nothing. I was learning the language of silent affection, a dialogue composed of the tiniest moments, none of which needed words to convey their weight. I started to notice how his presence changed my own perception of the world. The morning sunlight spilling over the streets became more golden, the sound of rain more musical, the faint scent of cedar on the wind more intoxicating. He made the mundane extraordinary simply by being there, simply by existing quietly alongside me. But alongside the joy, fear and doubt gnawed at me. What if he never felt the same? What if these feelings, beautiful and consuming as they were, could only exist unrequited? I began to question myself. Why had I allowed myself to fall so completely, so helplessly, for someone who seemed almost mythical in their detachment? The longing became both painful and precious, a contradiction I carried in my chest. There were nights when I would imagine conversations that never happened, moments that might have been, and I would replay the slight, fleeting gestures that had meant everything to me. I would sit by my window, watching the rain hit the pavement, imagining him somewhere nearby, oblivious to the storm of emotion I carried silently in his name. One day, he invited me to a small gallery opening. It was crowded, and the walls were lined with muted paintings. I followed him, careful not to intrude, trying to keep my distance while feeling every heartbeat like it was loud enough to echo across the room. We exchanged a few words about the art, his eyes lighting up when he described the brushstrokes, the textures, the feeling behind the colors. I realized then that I loved not just him, but his way of seeing the world, the way he observed life with careful attention, finding beauty in its smallest details. Weeks turned into months. Our small, quiet connection continued to grow in intensity without ever needing a name. I knew I was walking a line between hope and despair, between the pleasure of closeness and the ache of unspoken desire. I treasured every tiny smile, every accidental brush of hands, every moment where he glanced my way and paused just long enough to make my heart skip. And yet I knew, subtly, inevitably, that this love could not be fully realized. He was untouchable in a way that made proximity feel both thrilling and impossible. And so I carried it quietly within myself, like a song that only I could hear. The last time we met in that way was under a soft drizzle in early autumn. Leaves clung wet to the pavement, and the air smelled faintly of rain and smoke. He laughed at something trivial, not knowing how deeply I was watching him, feeling the intensity of a love that could never be claimed. I wanted to speak, to confess everything, but the words would have shattered the fragile thread that connected us. Instead, I smiled and we parted. I do not know where he is now. Perhaps he continues to walk through the city, noticing small wonders, oblivious to the way a quiet woman once admired him from afar. Perhaps he has moved on, perhaps not. But I carry him still, in my thoughts, in my memory, in the tiny ways I notice the world differently because of him. Love, I have learned, is not always about possession or reciprocation. Sometimes, it is about noticing, treasuring, and allowing yourself to feel profoundly, even when no one else will ever know. And in that silent, unclaimed love, I have found a kind of home I did not know I was searching for.